Well, it's 7 o'clock, Jonathan. Should we start the meeting?
Yeah, thank you.
Is your team here?
It looks like Rachel's here, so I think we're good. So let me start the introduction overall. Let me turn the video off here. Hi, welcome everyone to the September Washington Square West Zoning Committee meeting. There are two projects on the agenda tonight. Both are repeat projects we presented last month, 250 South 11th and 1100 Pine Street. Is anyone here for anything other than those two projects? Okay. Let's start with 1100 Pine, because I think that should be a pretty quick project. Just to refresh everyone, it's at the southwest corner of 11th and Pine. It's a proposed 4-story building with, I believe, 6 apartment buildings and ground floor commercial. They are requesting a variance for the use and a variance for the height. Based on the initial input from the neighborhood and the committee and people presenting at the first meeting, most people agreed that it was a pretty good project, like the design, like the density, but there was some general concern with the trash. I worked with the attorney Alan, who's on the call right now, and kind of gave my suggestions for the trash area, which he sent out today and I shared with the committee. But I assume, Alan, I'll let you present, and if there's anything else you'd like to state.
No, thank you for the opportunity to represent, at least specifically about the trash area. I did resend both the presentation materials we did last month, and the only update was to add that drawing about the trash area. And then I have a specific PDF just for that trash area. So if I could share my screen, I could just show you at least a cover page of the presentation materials from last month, which will show you the rendering of the facade of the property. And then we could just go straight to the trash area. Along with me, I have Leonard Hill, the owner of the property, as well as Gabe Deck, the architect as well. So I'm just going to share my screen. So as you can see, we're at the corner of 11th and Pine. We're looking to do a traditional red brick facade with a modern feel. As Jonathan stated, we tried to really match the look and feel of this part of Washington Square West neighborhood, and more importantly, the scale of it as well. Just a little background, we originally purchased this property anticipating being able to do the affordable housing bonuses due to pending legislation. Unfortunately, we have to go through this zoning variance process. Hold on a second. All right, so I'm just going to show you the trash room. Can everyone see my screen? Yep. I would assume. Okay. Yeah. So originally we had a trash room that was outdoors. We were asked to enclose it. So it would not be a potential nuisance to the neighborhood. So we reconfigured the first floor of the property to accomplish that task. So as you can see, we have a separate entrance for the trash room, and it's enclosed, and it has 3 bins for the commercial space and the 5. Well, there's a commercial space, but for basically the 5 residential units.
And as I discussed with Alan, the current back of that property is brick, and it has one single kind of wood fence, wood gate. And so what they've proposed, I believe, has the same amount of opening as currently, exists along the street. I think the single access with the vented trash room is better. They've reduced the number of trash cans. Again, they're showing 3 55-gallon containers, which is more than sufficient for 5 residences. So again, on my suggestion, they did some slight orientation changes, which are all acceptable to me. I thought this was a reasonable solution. And then from the owner's standpoint, it uses the same amount of square footage. The bedroom is slightly less. We might not like the bedroom layout quite as much, but I think it still maintains the integrity of the original unit as well. So I don't know, committee members, if there's any comments you'd like to have, additional comments you have. Okay, so with no committee members, are there any comments from the community?
Just I'll start. This is John Scott. I really appreciate the listening to the feedback and making the adjustments. Very much appreciated as a step. Just a kind of a little more of a description, so I understand on the wall that's facing Waverly, it would be probably if you can describe the height, and then I'm also interested in what is the back side, the side that's facing the property next door? Will that also be open and vented too?
Alan, could you pull up the elevation?
Yes, I can. And if Gabe Deck is on the call or the virtual meeting, I think it may be helpful if he answers that question. I just want to make sure it's accurate. So.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. All right.
I'm sorry, would you mind repeating the question?
It was just a little more of a description. An elevation view will help. A little more of a description of looking at that back end where the trash is, understanding what's the height of that, but also looking at what is it, how high does that go up, what's vented into the next door neighbor's yard. Just a little more description of that would be helpful.
Sure.
So I'll have one comment before they show this. So they can't legally vent to the west. You can't vent across a property line.
Right.
So that would be, so the only way they can vent is into the street.
That'll be a hard wall to the adjoining.
Correct.
Okay.
That's
Correct.
correct.
Yeah, you can't have an opening on a property line. So not that they're suggesting one.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you guys have updated your elevation based on this plan or not. You might not have because we were.
Did we, Gabe?
So we do not have an elevation view of that back where the trash door is, but if I could describe it to you, as reconfigured, we now are just proposing a solid door to the trash room, the vented trash room there. The trash room is at grade, just to make it easy to pull the trash cans, right onto the sidewalk there. We would have the bedroom would have a window facing the Waverly side. But yeah, as far as how you would experience that side and how the trash would impact you, there's just a single solid door that would face the street and no venting to the neighbor's side.
Just to be clear, and so that wall is actually 3 stories high. So it'll be a 3-story brick wall with windows for the various units.
Got it.
And a single door for the trash area. Does that sound correct?
Yeah, it would be a 3-story wall in similar, cladding and window pattern as the elevation that faces Pine Street and 11th Street.
Got it. Yeah, that answers my question because I think some of the neighbors we're trying to make the Waverly Street look more like a street than an alley. And there will be some planting of trees that's happening along that too. So having windows, having some things like that look like it's a residential versus an alley is at least important to me. So thank you.
And I had that discussion. I mean, right now it's a nice brick wall with a simple gate, and we wanted to maintain that kind of residential scale. And I believe that that's their intent.
Yeah. Thanks for answering my question.
I have a question. I missed the original presentation. Does that trash room, is there, the upper floors build over to that? So basically you fill the whole lot, right? Or is there a notch in the upper floors there?
Yeah, the second floor and third floor also cover 100% lot coverage. So
Okay.
The trash room.
Yeah, so it's not open to the above, Tony.
Okay.
Which again, for the neighborhood concern, the fact that the owner has place this within their buildings means they have to maintain it, because if they maintain it poorly, it would affect their own tenants. So I think everything about this is an improvement.
Yeah. Okay.
One question. I also wasn't at the last meeting. Can you just give an overview of the schedule? Like, where are we in the process? Is this construction documents? You're going for zoning approval, but what's the timeline in construction right now?
That's a good question. So this is the first step of the process. Anytime you want to use a property a certain way or construct a building, you first have to obtain a zoning permit. Here we're in the zoning variance process, where what we're proposing is not technically allowed by the zoning code of Philadelphia. We filed an appeal to the zoning board of adjustment. We have a hearing scheduled for November 10th at 2 p.m. As part of that process, the zoning board of adjustment wants community input. This organization has been selected as the coordinating RCO. They coordinate the scheduling of the meeting, facilitate the venue, and we make the presentation. Assuming this community as well as this organization approve of our project, we'll make that presentation, the same presentation to the zoning board of adjustment. The zoning board of adjustment will more than likely have a vote on November 10th. If we are successful, we will probably get a notice of decision confirming the results of that meeting or that vote within a month thereafter. So then we're probably sometime in December. We then give that notice of decision to L&I. We then get our zoning permit, and then we can submit and apply for our building permit. Once we get our building permit, Leonard, how long is the anticipated construction? About a year?
They will tell us 9 months, but it'll probably take a year. But they will schedule it for 9 months.
So did that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. I'm actually the resident in that building that's adjoining it, so I'm just a little concerned about the disruption with demolition and construction of a 4-story building. Is it anticipated that you'll have to underpin our building in order to construct this?
Absolutely.
Yes, and as part of that process, this is, again, when you apply for the building permit, you have to do construction drawings, but you also have to get certain approvals from the city. And there'll be engineering reports, geotech reports, things like that. Proof of, obviously, insurance of our contractors. So there's a lot of hoops for us to go through before we can actually do anything with regards to this building in terms of demolition and then the erection of a new building.
And I would note the underpinning permit has gotten much more challenging for applicants, and they'll actually have to provide engineering of the underpinning and the shoring at time of permit. They'll also have to send out, if I'm not mistaken, certified mail to all neighbors, advising them what's going on. And so Hannah, will be absolutely appraised of everything that's going on by the city process, and it is extremely carefully monitored. There's about a year and a half ago, there were several unfortunate incidents throughout the city with really some poor underpinning jobs. And so the city has really taken upon themselves to put extra care in the permitting and review of underpinning and sheeting and shoring for projects.
Okay, thank you. And I mean, it sounds like, the permit process with L&I can take a long time. So it sounds like we're a little far off from it.
Yes, I would agree.
And finally, Alan, can you put the image of the rendering on just one more time? There's a couple of people who joined late who just were questioning the size of the building. And again, it's a 4-story building, but the top story is set back. Thank you. And then, perfect. Any other additional questions or comments from the community?
Just one question on the setback from the Waverly side. How far back from the Waverly side is that 4th floor setback? About.
Let me look. I can tell you from there.
10
6 feet.
I think it's closer to 10.
Yeah, it's strategically set back both on Pine and Waverly. And, given the coloring too of the upper floor, with the black, we try to like minimize the height of the building as much as possible.
Yeah.
So,
Great, thanks.
oh, you're welcome. My Zoom is a little slow, so apologize.
Hi, can I add something, please?
Certainly.
Thank you. I'm Delaney and I'm with my partner Natalie, and we live at 1103 Waverly. And I just wanted to second Hannah's comments about her concern about the demolition in the building and how it'll affect our property as it's right next to it. And just, I know you spoke to the monitoring and the pinning, but just wanted to ask if you have any idea of how much work we'll need to do to have our building and its property managers work to make sure our building is secure and stable during this process, or is that done by you for both this property, 1100 and 1103?
So I'm sorry.
I can kind of speak to that. The process goes that we need to evaluate the adjacent structure to understand the existing foundation depths, to know exactly how much underpinning is required. Once we establish that, we can do the engineering design for the underpin process. The demolition process has its own engineering design as well. And both the both the demolition process and the underpin process require third-party inspection, continuous monitoring by the city. So there's, as described before, a lot of eyes on this throughout the whole demolition and underpin process, to ensure that adjacent structures are properly protected.
Okay, thank you so much. We were just concerned because when trucks go by, a lot of times we'll feel it and the building will move. So we just are especially concerned about the structure being so old. Yeah.
Looks like there are two other people with their hands raised.
Hi, this is Wendy Univer. I live on 11th, 416 South 11th. And I am very curious about how the commercial trash pickup is going to be handled for the large apartment building on the east side of 11th. That vendor comes between 3 and 5 in the morning and makes an enormous amount of noise. It's my understanding that legally that trash pickup should be done during normal business hours. Can the owner commit to us that trash pickup is going to happen at between 8 and 5 in the evening? 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. or something like that, 9 to 5?
That question. Okay.
No, Leonard, you can, you're.
So
the
I
owner.
think, okay, so first of all, I think legally, I think it starts at 7. That's legally. However, with that being said, I don't have any issue with having a trash picked up between normal business hours or hours that are reasonable for the community. I have no problem with that.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
So actually,
Halsey.
to piggyback off of what Wendy was saying, I think the building she might be referring to is 1034 Spruce, which is situated at 11th. And she might be talking about another one, but there is a building at 11th and Spruce, 1034 Spruce, which has a trash that's regularly picked up by private contractor in the back. In fact, it's very, putting a link in the chat. It's so commonly just left outside of the trash room that it's in Google Maps. And you may remember this from walking by. Is it actually a requirement through zoning for this property to have a trash room at all? I think a lot of us in the neighborhood live with small trash containers in our apartments, and then we bring them out to the street, on trash day.
So there's two things from a straight up zoning standpoint, like the code itself, there's no specific trash requirement. That being said, once someone is presenting to our us as the neighborhood, we will then consider the entire development. So it is, within our discussion to make certain that the trash, that their storage is acceptable to the neighborhood. We specifically spoke about the residential. The commercial is actually a little easier because commercial trash has to be stored within the building and it has to be picked up by private delivery. And those are existing laws. So I think that while I'm concerned about the commercial pickup in general, I'm less concerned insofar as there are laws that actually cover that more so than there are for residential pickup.
Okay, I mean, I guess generally if you don't have, someone managing those containers going back into the rooms at the end of the day or whenever they're picked up, they tend to just stay on the sidewalk. So if the Waverly residents are trying to make that more residential, that's just something they'll work with every week. So just a observation.
I'm not certain, but I think if it's under 6 units, the city trash picks it up. Is that
It
incorrect?
can be public. Yeah, it can be, under 6 units. Yeah, I think you could just do standard trash. But again, if they're using the trash room, they couldn't. So I don't think city trash will pick up 55-gallon bins. I think then you're in commercial pickup. But in any case, I think they've gotten to the trash. I guess there's one more person hand raised.
John, I do see a hand up that somebody's been very patient up there in the corner of my
Yeah,
screen.
you missed it. I was gonna say yes. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you for recognizing my patience. My name is Laura O'Hanlon, and my husband is on a separate Zoom box. We own the property across Waverly from 1100 Pine. So other than the residents at 1103, we might be the most directly affected personally. So the two questions I have, one is when construction begins, we have a parking spot right on Waverly. We're lucky enough to, and I think there's 3 other cars parked on Waverly. There's a lot of through traffic of cars. So when construction begins, which I realize is a long way off, is there a plan to keep that street free and clear for the through traffic? Including trash trucks and recycling trucks go through Waverly. So I would be worried about that being blocked for an extended period of time.
I think that's for me. There will be. I'm not going to pretend like we have that we've made a lot of plans at this point because we're probably still 6 or 7 months off. But I do appreciate the fact that it's a street that people need to enter and exit, both to park and also to enter and exit their homes. And it would be illegal to block the street off and unsafe. So yeah, all of that is taken into consideration. And in looking at the building, what will probably happen is the rear of the building where the parking spaces will probably be taken down first. So they have a place to kind of put everything on the property and then they can continue with the rest of the building.
Okay. All right. Thank you for hearing that.
And also when we start, I'm gonna give everyone my cell number. So you can, I know. Because I'm a glutton for punishment, I will give you my cell number, and whenever you want to call, if something is, because the reality is sometimes some things do happen that I'm, and I'm not there. But if you call me, I live at 18th and Lombard, and I work at 17th and Market. I can be there in 3 minutes.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
The other question I had, someone mentioned earlier, I think it was Mr. Nocumson, when you were describing the process, you said that people would be kept abreast of the process as it goes forward. And I'm wondering how that happens, because I know I wasn't at the last Zoom meeting. I found out after the fact, and we were one of the addresses where I know you had proof of mailing to a number of addresses. I don't recall getting that notice, so I'm just wondering what is the process for keeping the community updated.
Well, so the next, I have to take a look at, what addresses were given. The city gives us the addresses. So
Our
I-
address was on there. We just didn't
Okay.
approve whatever was sent.
Yeah, I don't know why we send everything just blindly. We just send it. The next time you'll have notice is you'll see orange posters on the building structure facing every public street for our hearing on November 10th. So you'll have an opportunity to get notified of the hearing date and time, and they'll have a link for Zoom, and it's on the hearing notice. I can also put my information in the chat, so you can email me, and I could, send you the notice that you did not receive. So it does have in the notice the information for the Zoom information for the hearing. The next thing, I think Jonathan kind of laid it out more. So about like you'll get notification potentially of some of the construction activities. Once we do get the building permit and the zoning permit, they have to be actually affixed, to the property. So you'll know what's going on.
Okay. Yeah, the ZBA has your date on their online calendar, and I mean that's public information. But anything beyond that,
Well, as a side note, there's a website. So two things. It will probably be beyond this. There's not really any official notification they need to make other than posting the zoning and posting the permits.
Okay.
But to the extent that they want to, there's a communication. I mean, anyone on this call should feel free to reach out to the Civic Association, zoning at washwestcivic.org or info.
Okay.
Beyond that, there's also a great website. If you do a search for Philadelphia Atlas, and from there, if you enter in the site's address, it'll list all the permits that are there, and you can actually keep abreast that way.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you.
One more design question. Can we just speak to the mechanical? Where will that be located on the building, and what will the sound be like for the neighbors right next door?
I can share my screen, but let me just share my screen.
So in terms of the mechanical units for the apartments, we have a space on the roof in between the fourth floor structures where we are planning to place all of the condensers. So in between two walls. Let me see if you look at the space in between those two volumes at the fourth floor, that's where we're planning to put our mechanical units.
Thank you.
And with regard to noise, the units are very quiet. I mean, this is like new technology. So these units they're quiet.
And also to that point, the city has pretty strong codes on mechanical noise. So anything they put in there can't be higher than 5 decibels above the ambient noise as measured from the building. So it by code, it can't be any louder than that.
Thank you.
Any more questions or comments?
My only comment is just to really appreciate having this call, pulling this together for people who felt either they missed it or didn't. Really appreciate the hosting this to be able to hear and listen and get more information. So thanks.
And to that, we should add, it's being recorded on Facebook under the WashWest Civic page. So if any neighbors hear about it and want to see this, they can go back and watch it in real time. Anytime. So if somebody doesn't remember what was said, you can go back and it's there in living color.
Yeah, that was very helpful. That helped me get me caught up because I watched last month. So I appreciate you guys doing that. Thank you.
Okay, without any questions, so after this meeting, the zoning committee will making a recommendation on whether or not to oppose the project. We will then take that recommendation and make it to the board at our board meeting on October 12th. Alan and Leonard, you do not need to be present at the meeting on the 12th. If there seems to be an issue, I'll let you know in advance of that. And we thank you for your time and welcome you to the community.
Thank you for
Thank you.
having us.
Have a great night.
Thanks.
See you.
Okay, so the second project is 250 South 11th Street. Just so this has been stated, the project is in my office, JKRP Architects. I'm actually specifically the architect for this project. So I will be recusing myself from the discussion of this project from the Civic Association. Last time at the presentation, my partner, Jerry Roller, presented. Tonight, I actually will be presenting because I'm only representing some small architectural updates. And I think the rest of the discussion and comments will be from attorney Rachel Pritzker, who is on the line. So Bob, I'm not sure if you would like to introduce the project.
Okay, I think a lot of you know me now, and I know a lot of you have communicated with me. So this is, as you know, 250 South 11th. To bring everybody up to date, I've received comments from quite a few of the neighbors. A group of the near neighbors, I'll call them, have hired an attorney and are working on a private agreement. So at this point, there's actually two tracks moving. There's the private agreement, and then there's the RCO agreement. And hopefully they'll be the same, but they will be two separate agreements. And if anybody has any questions on that, we might be able to answer them, or one of the attorneys on the line might be able to answer them as well on how that works. It's a little bit different than what usually happens, but in this case, I think it makes a lot of sense for the neighbors to be sure that things are going to turn out the way they expect it to if the project moves ahead. Another housekeeping issue for some of you who may not know, and I don't know what Jonathan's showing, he hasn't shared it with me. We're keeping things separate as we should. But yeah, if he does share his screen, there's a button at the top that you can make your screen larger and enlarge what he's showing you, which some of you may find helpful, especially on a smaller screen. So with that said, I think, as we said, this is a second presentation, so I don't think there's going to go over the entire project. More appropriately would be to pick up and talk about how they responded to comments from the community members. So with that introduction, I think, Rachel, are you on here? I don't see you, but.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, there you are. I'll turn it over to you to take it from here, if that's okay.
Sure. And is Harry Cook on the call by chance?
Let me take a look.
Just that's who's representing some of the neighbors. So.
I'm not seeing him unless he has a different screen name.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess what would probably be helpful is I can just kind of go over the main concerns that the neighbors had, specifically around having this be it not venting, like so it's going to be a bubble tea shop for those on the ground floor with 4 residential units above, for anyone who's unfamiliar with the matter.
Rachel, I don't want to cut you up, but I guess just so people know, they should understand that the variance is one to put the bubble shop in, and the second variance is for multiple units on the second floor. Those are the two main issues with
Correct.
regards to the zoning side, and then the other issues are more specific to accommodating the neighbors to allow them to hopefully support your, from your point of view, supporting your zoning variance.
Yeah, the location of the property it's CMX1, but it's directly adjacent to RSA 5. And so it takes on the most restrictive zoning classification, even though if it was one property over, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation, although it's always beneficial to have any uses in a place where the neighbors are comfortable with it. So the other uniqueness about it is this property fronts on 11th, but abuts on Jessup Street, which is a residential and very proudly historic street as well. So a lot of the concerns of the neighbors relate to just making sure that their quality of living is maintained in a certain way and that we're respectful of a lot of the work that they've put in over the years related to the historic nature of the block. That's what we're here for. It's a pretty large building, as Jonathan can go into. And so although we have a refusal for the number of units, otherwise it'd be some quite large units compared to how big this is. A street to street property. So a lot of the changes that we made, first and foremost, is the roof deck. There was concerns about noise coming from the roof deck. So the asks were, could we locate the roof deck as far forward to 11th Street as possible, which we did, obviously without causing additional refusals or something unsafe. And there were some comments about trying to do some noise attenuating walls or mechanisms to help eliminate the amount of noise, in addition to limiting the hours that people can be on the roof deck, which is not really a zoning thing, but more so contained in sort of the private agreement. And then some of the other concerns related to just utilization of the building as far as trash, the comings and goings, to limit all of that as much as possible, except for in emergencies. And if there's a need from a utility company perspective, to kind of utilize the 11th Street side and to eliminate, any cars, pedestrian traffic, seating, exits, except for an emergency, or any of the workers of the restaurant to be on the Jessup Street side of the property. Other than that, from a architectural revision perspective, I think the rest of the concerns were generally related to like the historic nature of the sidewalk, and some other concerns regarding the venting of the building, not having there's going to be steam produced by the cooking of the bubble tea, but not anything that we scented. And I think the rest of it was more so just courteous neighbor considerations, more so than like architectural revisions or zoning related. And feel free, Jonathan, to jump in if I missed anything.
Well, yeah, and so I will present the roof deck right now. Let me share my screen. So on the screen right now is the revised roof deck. So the left side is 11th, to the right side is South Jessup, north is at the bottom of the screen. So we've located the roof deck much further to the east, as close to 11th as possible. It is now 55 feet from the edge of the deck to Jessup Street. And the neighbor directly to the south, who's concerned about the proximity to our window, it is now 25 feet away from that. What we are proposing in terms of sound attenuation, let me zoom in a little bit, is on these heavier lines on the west wall, and then about half of the south wall. We are proposing a 6-foot tall fence. The inside of that fence would have an acoustic padding. I will pull up the image right here. It is actually acoustic blankets, specifically for exterior use. They're actually typically used for sound absorbing around heating and cooling units, but they are made for exterior use. So the general design concept is that some of the sound will be absorbed by the acoustic material and then would reflect away from the 6-foot tall fence. 6 feet is as high as we can go from a zoning standpoint. And then also the ask was to go on all sides. We are requesting to not do that. Our goal was to protect the residents to the west and to the south. We don't want to enclose all 4 sides, as it wouldn't be a pleasant space at 6 feet tall. So we are leaving the north and the east side open. And that is the general change to the roof deck. And I think that's the only architectural change, Rachel, from the various items that were discussed.
Okay. I mean, Robert, if you think it's helpful, I can go through some of the other stuff that's not zoning related, but I guess, like you said, we're in conversations with the neighbors and the owners here as well, and we're committed to working through that. We had some small tweaks that we went back with, and I spoke with their attorney twice today. So that's why I was just curious if he was on the call. But from a zoning perspective, I think we've done as much as we can to address the concerns. The rest of it will be involved in this separate agreement.
Okay, but I think a lot of those in the separate agreement would probably be carried over into a proviso
That's
Did that make
fine.
sense?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine with us. We have no problem with that.
Yeah, because I had told people that if they weren't a signer on the private agreement, they wouldn't have any standing under it.
And
So-
we're fine with that. I had kind of articulated a similar suggestion. So yeah, that's fine.
Okay, and one of the questions that's come up from quite a few people about the, and I know you kind of addressed it, about the fact that it'll be a restaurant in there now, so to speak, a bubble tea shop. But what will happen if the bubble tea shop decides to close in terms of what would be allowed in the property going forward?
Sure. So the language that we had suggested in the agreement, which, you know, again, is still under conversations, is that we could agree to no smoke producing cooking, and we would be happy to have that included in a proviso. We didn't want to have it be something where that there's going to be no cooking, because the pearls for the tea require cooking with steam. So we thought that that was a fair way to limit it. And then obviously anybody who would want to change that would have to come in front of the community and the neighbors to obtain their support. So as long as it says that, you know, no smoke producing cooking, we're okay with that, but we do need to be able to cook with steam.
I understand it. So if we wrote that same language into a proviso, that would mean that if the bubble shop closed, you wouldn't be able to open like a steak shop in there?
They would be only able to open something that provides that they would cook with no smoke. So yeah, no cheesesteak place, no fast food place. I mean, maybe a coffee shop, something like that, but something that doesn't utilize smoke.
And when it's in a proviso in the L&I records, that stays with the building indefinitely until it's removed.
Correct.
There's no lifetime on that. And if all the neighbors change on the block, that would still be in effect.
Yeah,
Somebody goes back and looks for
the
it.
only way it goes away is if the building's demoed, but then you're stuck with CMX1, which is more restrictive than what we're offering. So no, there's no real way to go around that. In addition, when you pull any other permits for the building, those provisos, actually, if you look on the lower part of the zoning permits, they have them there as well. So yes.
And that would account for any proviso that's written in for the
Correct.
For the neighbors that aren't part of, and of course, the neighbors that are part of the agreement, they would have their own venue for.
Yeah, they would have they would have double protection in a sense.
I just want to make sure everybody understands the two processes. That's why I'm asking this question, because I don't think it's been clear in everybody's mind how the two would work together or separately.
Yeah, because to your point, Robert, L&I is not going to be privy to the community benefits agreement, but they would be privy to whatever memorialized on a zoning permit for that they can actually enforce, what has to do with zoning. So it's a great way to be able to have that in writing so that L&I is aware of it. And then, like you said, in addition, the other stuff would have to go on a separate agreement anyways. And
then I don't know if this is the right question, but obviously the Civic doesn't have an attorney to write these. Is that something that the applicant would be willing to help write the provisos in the form acceptable to L&I?
Yeah, sure.
That way we all know what they say, but honestly, we don't have an attorney on staff to write these things. And if
Sure.
you and Mr. Cook are writing them for the benefit of the neighbors, it would probably be helpful between the two parties.
Happy
have
to.
parallel agreements so that they're not in conflict with each other.
I'm happy to do that.
I wouldn't want to communicate. I wouldn't want one to say something, the other to say something else. That would not be good for anybody.
Sure.
So not to monopolize it, but those were my questions. I guess we'll open it up to it's a relatively small group here. However, if any of the other board members and neighbors have comments.
Hi, this is Patrick Cox. I have my hand up. I'm
Yes.
a resident on Jessup Street. And Rachel, I was just wondering about the enforceability of these provisos against
Sure.
the current owners and against future owners. And are you familiar with any instances in which L&I has actually enforced provisos?
So yes, so let me start with the first one, which is was the question, how do they enforce them, or the longevity of it?
Enforceability of them, yeah, against the current owners, and then enforceability against future owners. And are there any instances in which L&I has actually done that?
Sure. So like Robert mentioned, the beauty of the proviso is that actually gets incorporated. It gets read onto the record by the chairman of the zoning board out loud and then gets included in the record and also on the zoning permit. So after we go to a hearing, we get what's called a notice of decision. We submit that to L&I with the proviso plan form and the revised plans, and then they actually memorialize that into a zoning permit that's included for the record. Zoning permits do not follow an owner, they follow a property. So even if the property was to be sold or somebody, leased it or whatever, it's not like if these owners took up and left and the permit goes with them. It stays with the property. And same with the provisos. The only way to get them removed off the property would be to have someone apply for another application and come in front of the group, as long as it wasn't something that was permitted by right. As far as enforcement, I have seen them enforce it. Unfortunately, and the reality of it is, it's typically something like any kind of contract where L&I has to come out, they'll see it on the permit. Typically also it gets integrated in, they'll review it before they do the building permit too. You have to have zoning to have building. So they'll actually review the zoning permit to make sure that like any provisos that it said, we didn't try to sneak anything into the building permit plans. I've seen that in instances where people have gotten a reduction in a number of units and then tried to submit to building with providing the amount that they wanted. And then building comes back and says, no, you have a proviso that says only 8 units or whatever. As far as enforcement, does L&I walk around and look at every building? No, there's over 500,000 individual parcels of land in the city of Philadelphia alone, and that doesn't consider what's on them. So are they, and we have less than 1,000 inspectors. So are they sitting around looking? No, but typically the way that, because it's so apparent on the zoning permit, they can easily see it. It's on all their records. It's filed with the city. And so it'll be easy for them if there's a complaint to be able to see what the provisos were. I've seen it enforced before because I've represented neighbors, I've represented homeowners, and it's been things where we know we specifically said this, we agreed to that, and we can easily show the inspector. The difference between a proviso and a community benefits agreement is that obviously for two things, the proviso can only deal with things that are related to zoning. The Zoning Board of Adjustment and L&I can't regulate things that are outside of that the zoning code allows. That's why people typically do both or do one or the other, depending on what the concerns are. The only way to enforce a community benefits agreement is through a court, right? So you have to sue someone that it's a legally binding contract. You have to sue someone that they're in breach. That's the same with a lease or any kind of contract you're thinking of. So the beauty of a proviso is that it's actually incorporated into the zoning permit. L&I is responsible for enforcing it. CBA, a lot of those concerns are not related to zoning, and you'd have to actually go in front of a judge and win a breach of contract in order to see that. And I've seen that be successful a few times, but you're sitting 1 year, 2 years, 3 years in court to try to get some of that done. So it's like any contract you'd make with anybody that you hope that people uphold it, and you'll see by their actions whether they do or don't. I wouldn't have my clients agree to any written contract that they don't plan on keeping up with. I wouldn't advise that, and I'm not interested in litigating against neighbors whose concerns, in my opinion, and in my client's opinion, are extremely reasonable.
Thank you for that explanation. And so if we were to see a dumpster show up on Jessup Street, or if we were to see an exhaust fan come out the back of the building, we would contact L&I, and you think we could be successful in having that removed? Yeah,
because we wouldn't have a permit for any of those things as well. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
I would add too, for people who don't know, as Jonathan mentioned, you can go, the city has the Atlas Philadelphia site where everything that's part of the zoning code or part of the building file is there in PDF and accessible, and it goes back to the I think somewhere around the 1930s. And you can go back and pull every page and see everything that's happened on that property, and anything new will be added to those files if it's done properly by the city. So it's there forever. So you're not counting on the civic keeping track of it, or or somebody in the neighborhood keeping track of it. It's there for anybody who wants to look it up. And that's free and to the public.
You can also look on the L&I property search. If you just type in L&I property search, you can also look there. Sometimes there's a discrepancy between what gets uploaded on Atlas and what gets uploaded on L&I's website. So I just tell people to check both, just in case one of the systems didn't get updated.
Elizabeth, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you. We had a couple of questions that haven't been covered so far, and it relates to some of the issues with the property. First of all, is it possible to have us receive that revised plan for the roof deck?
Sure.
We would like to see that. You have my email, so you can, just send it over if you can do that. That would be great.
Sure.
We're concerned about where the HVAC, the compressors are going to be. Could you tell us a little bit about what's going on with those?
Sure. Jonathan, are you able to speak to that?
Yes, sorry about that. Yeah, I mean, so they will be located on the roof. They'll be located, just west of the roof deck.
How many of them are there going to be?
We haven't considered it, but there's 4 units plus a commercial space. So you'd anticipate there's somewhere minimum 5, between 5 and 6.
Yeah, we were told it's probably going to be 6. Can you tell me what the provisions are being made for soundproofing for those? We've had a great deal of problem with what's been on the roof on the Jefferson building. That took quite a while to resolve. We heard it all the way over here on Quince.
I hear it at 11th. I'm at 11th and Lombard, and I hear it.
Yeah, so we don't want to go through that issue. So we need to understand and be assured, what the equipment is going to be, and certainly what the soundproofing options are on that.
I mean, I'll speak to my client. I don't know if they're on board, but probably what I would present,
Yeah, she's
same
on board.
soundproofing. She's there? Okay.
Yeah,
What I would suggest is basically the same soundproofing that we're utilizing for the fence is actually made specifically for units like that. So I don't see it being too problematic to build a small enclosure around the units with similar soundproofing.
Okay, that would be like critical for us.
And
Really
just so Elizabeth, typically the details of the HVAC do not get showcased on the zoning permit or the zoning drawings, but they'll be highlighted on the building. That's why you don't see them. They'll be on when we do the building permit submission.
Okay.
And as I mentioned on the previous case, just one sec, and sound again is regulated by the city. So any rooftop equipment cannot be louder than 5 decibels above the ambient sound, which is like the natural sound at any given time.
Yeah, we know what the rules are, but we also know what we live with. So
understood. Yep, understood.
We did have another question about on the previous plans that we saw in August. There is a very large question about what the residents are going to be doing with their trash. Where is that? What's the plan for the residents' trash?
So on the ground floor, the ground floor, this trash would, actually I take it back. There's a residential trash closet on the 2nd floor, excuse me.
That looks awful
storage.
small, 4 units.
Well, it's large enough to hold 2 20-gallon containers. So if there's a specific requirement, it's certainly we can accommodate it, but all the trash has to be inside.
Right, and that's going to be exited out, taken out to the 11th Street side of the properties. That's correct?
Yes.
That's absolutely correct.
Okay. There is one more issue that we need to have a little bit more information about, and that concerns the cellar door that is now on the Jessup Street side of the property. It's our understanding, of course, that the door is going to be used during construction. We had some questions about what's going on with the basement. Is there a basement in the front part of the building on the 11th Street side?
The basement's full depth is a full depth of the site.
It's a full basement. Okay.
Yes.
So there would be a possibility then of, are you having plans to put in access to the basement from the retail part of the operation like they had next door at Middle Child?
Well, I can't, so I can speak to the construction, or the owner speak to the operation. in terms of access of using the Bilco door in the rear, the intent would only be for mechanical equipment during construction. Again, and that's why that door is there. It's specifically there for large pieces of equipment, which we otherwise can't get in the basement. There is no knowledge, to my knowledge, and please speak, Christina, otherwise, that they have any intent on using that for loading whatsoever. It would only be, it would only be used specifically for those early instances of being able to get large equipment in and out of the building.
Yeah, the only other thing I would say to that is we had included language in our draft just about if like a utility company needed to access the basement to service something and they couldn't do it through the 11th Street. We didn't want to be unable to have, a third party service something. But I don't believe there's no other intention.
Our concern is something the owner said last time about most of the things for the shop coming in large boxes. And we certainly can't have the Jessup Street side be a constant place for boxes coming in, boxes coming out, boxes being shifted up to come in the back doors.
Again,
Sorry.
I'll just speak. Those Bilco doors are in no way convenient. So, I mean, the only reason you use those is because there's no other physical way to get something to the door. But Christina, I don't know, why don't you speak to whether or not you intend on using that?
Actually, it would be really inconvenient to use the Jessup Street to load boxes into the building. So our best way is through the 11th Street side. It's a lot more convenient. It's more open, and certainly a lot easier in distance-wise to load boxes. So the trucks wouldn't even be able to go in through Jessup Street. Everything has to be done on the 11th Street side. It just makes more sense.
Okay, thank you.
And one comment I did notice that the residential trash is actually will be on 2 levels. There'll be one for each floor. So there's a 2nd floor and 3rd floor. So that's why they're small.
So the plan then is to have the residents themselves take the trash down out to the street on 11th Street, or?
It would be up to the owner. I don't know if there's, again, as was mentioned, at 6 units, you can use the local pickup. So it would be, yes, it would either be the residents or the building manager would take it out at the designated time.
But the trash trucks can't fit on Jessup Street, so they would be on.
Everything's 11th Street. Yes, everything is 11th Street.
Okay,
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Drew, I see you have your hand up.
Thanks, Bob. Just to disclose, I'm a board member, new board member at WashWest. I'm not on the zoning committee, so I'm here sort of observing, also as a neighbor around the corner on 11th. So Bob, who else is on? Jonathan's recusing himself, and so the zoning committee who will make a recommendation tonight or will vote is you and who else?
But let me actually let's clarify that. So there won't be any vote tonight. And the zoning committee doesn't have to make we can discuss it tonight, but we don't have to make a recommendation. And the neighbors have asked that we don't until they get farther in the negotiations. And I think at this case, it's kind of appropriate that if the committee talks, we talk about the general direction, but that we don't make any definite recommendation until we have some more information back from the parties on where their settlement. That would be my thought. And then the formal decision will be made by the board at the public board meeting, where I'll make a presentation based on what the committee discusses tonight and what we hear from the neighbors and the attorneys over the next couple of days.
When is that meeting, Robert?
Jonathan, we mentioned it's the 2nd Tuesday of October. I believe it's the 12th. I don't have my calendar here in front of me.
Okay.
And it's 1 week before your about 1 week before your formal ZBA hearing.
Okay, cool.
So that would be the earliest we'd have a formal decision, because that's when the board votes, and the board vote is the only one that counts. I mean, generally the board would go along with the zoning committee, but they're not, they don't have to, they can make their own decision.
Well, yeah, and
as I said to the neighbors, that the board meeting's not intended to be a 3rd hearing. It's intended more of an overview from probably myself to present, and certainly the neighbors are welcome to speak up again Yeah.
And I appreciate that, a lot of effort on all sides, and the applicants and the neighbors, have done a lot of work. I'm still not convinced on the variance for the restaurant for many reasons. And I don't know if that's appropriate now or with the board, but so there is a neighbor group that is working very diligently, but we actually had more neighbors register their opposition than those that are represented by the group here tonight and who are working with council. So while they're not continuing to come to every meeting, they've registered their objections in writing. And I don't think we can dismiss them just because they didn't hire counsel.
We have, sorry to interrupt. I'm not aware of any of those letters. I've not been sent anything. So I can't address concerns for people that don't reach out.
Yeah, you wouldn't be expected to, Rachel, but the board would be. I mean, they're not engaged with you, so they wouldn't communicate with you about their objections. So
the reason, and I get that, I guess my concern is to have your board vote based on additional neighbors that we're not even able to have conversations with or address their concerns, kind of puts us in a difficult place. And I'm not.
I'll count. Wait, I apologize for kind of. I have to say this. Any information that comes out needs to be disseminated to all parties. So that has to occur. So if the board receives something, the applicant needs to receive it, and so forth. Unconditionally.
Okay, so there's a lot of communications that need to be disseminated yet. Okay, so that's I guess the first point. I am concerned that while I'm 100% in favor of protecting Jessup Street, I don't want to trade Jessup for 11th. And while I understand access and all of that is much more convenient and necessary, I also know what it looks like as I've taken pictures the last 2 beautiful Sundays in front of Middle Child, and on that street where 11th Street is loaded with trash containers and overflowing bins on a beautiful Sunday when nobody's picking up trash. Like, that's not good for our neighborhood, even if Jessup Street looks pristine. I worry about the enforceability and the transferability of an agreement that would be made, a private agreement. I understand sort of from a legal perspective that it should all work, but in reality, it doesn't. So I don't think that that personally I would rely on that. And then I guess the overriding point is I just don't think that we need another restaurant right there. We've got vacant restaurants, underutilized restaurants, 2 restaurants next door, and there's plenty of conforming uses, be it retail, be it professional, be it health spa, be it an insurance agency. I mean, there's plenty of uses for that space. I actually don't think there's anything wrong with more density. That's good for the neighborhood. I think roof decks are going to be a way of life with everybody wanting more outdoor space. But I haven't heard anything that convinces me that a restaurant of any type would be a good idea there.
Were you at the first meeting?
Yeah, I've been at every meeting.
Okay, I just didn't. I guess the only comment I would share is that it's not uncommon to have other restaurant uses. This isn't like a sit down restaurant. This is going to be a bubble tea shop that is going to be partnering with the owner of the building, and is a pretty well-known low impact type of restaurant or restaurant use. I also would say that just largely given some of the work I do in this city and what we've all experienced with the pandemic, that supporting businesses, especially small businesses coming to our city that are going to contribute to employment and our tax base, is actually quite valuable, as opposed to trying to corral them to other locations or places or make sure that, or have them put in a type of a use that may seem like less of an issue, but if you put retail here, talk about loading and boxes and all sorts of stuff like that, traffic. So I just would hope that people can stay a little bit more open-minded in supporting, small businesses coming to our city, especially ones who are willing to work with, local neighbors and groups to really address a lot of concerns, because I've just seen groups who won't do that. And so I've appreciated that in working on this. So that's sort of what I would say to this. And in my opinion, it seems like it's not out of reach as far as what's there. And really it's a mechanism of the way that it's zoned, although this is a commercial corridor. So just a little bit of a response to your comments.
I guess I should add that the letters we've gotten, I've shared with the zoning committee so that they're aware of all the letters. As best I can tell, almost all of them were from people on Jessup Street, and there were more than the people that are here on it. I believe a lot of people wrote the letters before the first presentation, and while I can't speak for them, I got the sense that a lot of them were less concerned after hearing the first presentation than they were prior to hearing it. And I've continued to email with a group of people larger than the near neighbors in the agreement. I can't say I've reached everybody by any means, because I'm not sure who they all are, but I have been trying to keep people up to date that are on Jessup Street, but may not be part of the neighbors that are negotiating with an attorney, so that they're aware of what's going on. And I haven't been getting extra negative feedback, is what I should say. So, I would welcome if people had additional comments, continue to reach out to me. But Barbara, you have some. You're on mute there, Barbara.
Yeah. Thanks for those comments, Drew. I happen to agree with you, and we have just cause to be very wary, if not opposed to a restaurant. We have the Huff and Puff and Middle Child, and quite honestly, especially the Middle Child, he's been a bad neighbor from the get-go. When he first moved in, instead of putting his trash receptacles in front of his address at 248 South 11th Street, he put them at the end of our block on the corner of Locust and Jessup. And we asked him many, many times to put them in the appropriate spot, but he pretty more or less blew us off. And I think Patrick can attest to that, because Patrick and I were involved in trying to get him to put his trash receptacles in the right spot. It wasn't until we got Councilman Squila, who is a terrific councilman for us and really, really appreciates Jessup Street. It wasn't until we got Councilman Squila involved that he finally started to do the right thing and put the bins where they belong. Now I want to show you two pictures of what his trash currently.
Barbara, don't do that.
Yeah. Whoops. I'm doing this wrong. Okay. Yep. Okay. That is the rear of the building at 248 South Jessup Street. Those are the vents, and the red bins are his trash. I can move this forward. I'm not able to do this properly, but I just wanted to give you a sense of what we've been dealing with, and why, quite frankly, I'm very wary of having a restaurant. You can see that you can see the brake chair, you can see the overflowing fluids.
Did you have an agreement with this owner when that business came in?
No.
There's been a restaurant there for decades, I think. So no, they just I can't speak for everybody, but I believe they just opened under right.
Yeah, and yeah, I guess
fortunately that 248, which and 246, the Huff and Puff and the Middle Child, don't run through to our street. So we've got we're lucky because we don't have to experience it directly, but the 250 is a very different matter for us. So, I mean, we do have a legitimate reason to be concerned.
Yeah, and I think that I think we agree. I think we've heard the concerns and have done our best and are continuing to do our best to address them. I don't want to have us penalized for what someone else is doing, and maybe someone else who didn't spend the time to have these conversations. And I think that all of that was definitely heard and appreciated. And I think our response to the neighbors and has been evidence of that. It doesn't really benefit Christina and anyone else to have issues with directly adjacent near neighbors for a business, especially in these kind of times. So I hope that the effort that we made has at least shown you that we do believe the concerns are valid, and we're trying to do everything within our ability to address them, while also, making sure that we can utilize a building in some type of a way.
And I appreciate that. Thank you.
And it seems like the owners are willing to put in the agreement to prevent a restaurant of what you're opposing, because the bubble tea shop is more like a coffee shop, which is more of a low impact type situation.
That's correct.
Karen, I see a hand up.
Unmute yourself. You're muted.
Sorry. Okay. Hi. What is the hardship to the applicant if it's used for any other purpose? Does it have to be a restaurant to fully utilize your building, other than the applicant's wish to be a partner in the bubble tea?
Give me a chance to bring up the refusal, because I think that'll better help answer the concern. And I apologize, we talked about a lot of this in the first meeting, so I just didn't have this stuff readily available. I apologize. So essentially the uses provided by CMX1 sort of take on, they're extremely restrictive. Most of the adjacent properties that are CMX1 have gotten variances for this type of use, because a commercial corridor like this, typically you see CMX1 in like neighborhoods where it's directly adjacent, the entire street is RSA5, and then CMX1s are on the corner because they don't want to have some like robust use. It's pretty rare, besides for the fact that our city is inundated with other stuff to worry about remapping, that you see like a middle property on a commercial corridor like this directly adjacent to other businesses have such a restrictive classification. I could certainly go through the list of permitted uses. This location has also sat vacant for I think a decade and a half. So that's a hardship in and of itself, just in the sense that if something else could have gone there that would have made sense based on the zoning that's permitted, it probably would have been there by now. It's sat vacant for 15 years, and most of the other buildings are also non-conforming uses. So it's not out of character.
But it does have the front to back, full front to back is unique to that property.
But it's not a reason why someone couldn't put, it's actually more space than any of the other ones. So
what is the hardship to your client if not permitted a restaurant?
We would have to put in another use that potentially is more out of character and isn't viable in the area, which I think I've explained. Plus also everything that's there is in character. You have other restaurants, and we're willing to limit our use to, address these concerns.
And you understand that our concern is that once a restaurant, now it's its current use, and we're welcoming any future restaurant.
That's not accurate. We had explained that when we put in a proviso saying, no smoke producing cooking, that any other restaurant would have to be one that produces no smoke no smoke producing cooking. That's what a proviso is. It's a prohibition on parts of a use. So no, they would not allow to have any other restaurant just come in. That's actually not allowed. And specifically because when you go to open a restaurant, you have to also deal with the building permit, and you also have to deal with the health department who checks your use. They won't issue you approvals from a health perspective without seeing your permit, in which case all of this is showcased on the permit. So unless we get an inspector who's never ever worked in the city of Philadelphia ever and doesn't read a permit, I would find it hard to believe that you would just see a random other restaurant that doesn't take in any of these considerations pop up.
Well, my last question, I don't want to monopolize, but my last question is, when you put up the new revised plans for the building, I didn't see an internal venting area. Jerry Roller said last time that he would welcome incorporating some venting through the building. Is that in there now or no?
So I'll explain. So we will certainly provide venting to the building. Right now, we're at such a preliminary level of design that it's not something we would coordinate at this level of plans, but certainly all venting and all the HVAC will go through the roof, and I'm certain our client will sign any proviso regarding that.
Okay, so the several or 6 possibly air-conditioned condensers will make a lot of noise. So does the venting. So can that also be contained with the soundproofing for the air conditioning? Would that be in the same space?
I mean, yes, if there's a mechanical, we can certainly restrict all mechanical equipment to a single area that we can sound isolate.
So, I mean, I would like to see that also soundproofed as much as possible, if it comes up through the roof also. So,
again, and for the sake of at this point, we're not at the phase where we're going to start hiring engineers to do that level of detail, but conceptually, it's something we would agree to.
Okay, because we can't really, when we've discussed, I can't really see where else it could go. It's
all going to go on the roof.
Okay, so through the building.
Correct.
There's also there's a light well, Jonathan, that goes up the side. Is that correct? That's interior to the block.
Yeah, but that we wouldn't be putting anything up that light well because we need that natural light for the units themselves.
Okay, that's
but
good.
but we're effectively gutting the entire building, so the ability to run vertical shafts won't be difficult because we're rebuilding all the floors. So to incorporate those is not an issue.
Okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood that was, I thought that was to be demonstrated now, so I apologize.
I think it's a good question, and it's one that needs to be brought up and understood. And I don't want to make it sound like I'm advocating for one thing or the other. That'll be up to the board as a whole. But again, as we talked about with the proviso, those issues, if they're written in there properly, and that's an if, they'll be visible to everybody, as opposed to the private agreement that might say the same thing that will remain private. So that's again why we really need both of them, so that everybody sees what's going on. Philip, do you disagree with me? I see you nodding your head.
Yes, the private agreement would be filed with the court and attached to the land records, and those would be.
Oh, Phil.
You okay? Does I guess does anybody else have any comments or questions? While Elizabeth,
Just
Barbara, I see your hand up again.
yeah. Jonathan, along with the revised plans of the roof deck, can you send us information about the soundproofing fence?
Yeah, within the there'll be both details and a spec of the soundproofing equipment was already sent to the board, and Robert and Bob can share that with you.
Okay, thank you.
Certainly.
So again, I guess on the zoning committee tonight, it's that's here tonight is myself, Tony, Catalina, and Marissa. I think are the formal members of the committee that are here tonight. There's a few members that aren't here that'll have input, but it's the entirety of the board that'll make the decision October 12th, based on what's reported from tonight and what we see in writing, hopefully between the various parties, and as Rachel indicated, the provisos. And those would be the decisions that'll make the board's decision. To support it, not support it, or support it in part. I think I explained that properly. Anybody, Drew, did you have any other additional comments or anything? Tony? Marissa, I know you've been quiet.
My only comment is to just make sure that we have all the letters and opposition, points in front, and that the committee is aware of all that. Because if some of it went to the board and it doesn't get disseminated to the committee, then
I'll go back and check my records, but I'm reasonably sure I've shared it all with the committee as they came in that day. You probably got.
Yeah, we got a lot of. I remember getting a lot of information.
There were quite a few of them, and so I'm quite sure I hit send almost as quickly as they came in to make sure that I wasn't missing anything.
Robert, can we organize maybe that on a file so we can have them all in one place? Happy to help if you need assistance with that.
We can try. I have 10,000 emails in my inbox, but I should be able to go back and find them.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but those were, I guess you had read some of those at the first meeting.
Yeah, they were all received before. I will say they were all received before the first meeting. So
okay.
I do believe, honestly, that a lot of the concerns that people raised were addressed in the first meeting, and a lot of concerns that people raised were in anticipation of what didn't happen, of what wasn't presented. People had a lot of concerns that were completely reasonable, except for that the applicant wasn't putting in a full service restaurant as people were expecting from the tone of the letters. And likewise with the front entryway that's proposed and not having the entryway onto Jessup Street, there was a lot of concern about using that rear entrance as a public entrance for the apartments. And it's my understanding that that's off the table at this point, as well as the trash. Those were the issues that kept coming up over and over. Well, it sounds like we've covered everything. At this point, I think what we would do is, unless people have other issues, we'll call the meeting to conclusion. We'll stop the recording, stop the Facebook, and the committee will meet to discuss. Just the committee and the board members are welcome to stay on as well because they're part of it, to discuss the 1100 Pine Street project. And at that point, then we would ask Jonathan to leave, and the remaining members of the zoning committee would discuss this project as to where we're going forward on it. So if there's no other objection, that would be Karen.
I guess last thing, I don't know that I got an answer for what would the hardship be if it wasn't a restaurant, because I'm thinking there are medical buildings or offices, law offices, salons. It's not just restaurants on that block. So what is the harm to your client if there's something else put in there on that first floor? I really would like to know.
The potential for the building to just sit vacant, because I appreciate in theory that some of these uses seem reasonable and easy to get, but we're dealing with quite an interesting time right now. I can't emphasize that enough, just given the amount of commercial to residential conversions that are happening, office spaces that are sitting vacant all over our city. And that if you look at the use chart for CMX1, a lot of the uses are like adult care, family childcare, group childcare, things that I think would be potentially more impactful, or that it might not be a suitable space for. So I think that if they had been able to find a building that had the perfect zoning, that would be great. And that was suggested by someone else, but that's not often the case. You find a building that's available for sale, and then you try to work within some constraints and be considerate of the other concerns. I think it would be an ideal world if any other use and any other business could just pop in any space, but that's just not in the reality how it works. So it would potentially stay vacant, which I don't think helps anyone, or would have to have some other use that I don't know would be viable, because just, I don't want to speculate of the viability of some of these. I can just tell you from looking at this chart, and I'm happy to share this with you, though it's extremely limited, the uses. Most of them you have to go through special exception, or they're limited in size, which makes it also difficult for different businesses. If you have a retail space that can only be 2,000 square feet, well, it's maybe 1,000 square feet of actual space to use. Plus, then you have to put in storage and things of that nature, and then you have to put people in there. So it's a bit limiting. Like I said, typically CMX1 is not reserved for large properties. And as you probably know, when they go through remappings, they don't specifically go through every single property, the size of the buildings, the current uses. They don't do that. It's a broad stroked remapping that they think makes sense. So that's as best as I can explain it.
I guess I would add to that that the ZBA hearing, whatever, regardless of whatever the civic decides, the ZBA hearing is 100% open to the public, and if you register, anybody is entitled to comment, and and the board's generally fairly lenient in listening to people's comments and taking them into consideration. And it's a requirement if you intend to object to it down the road, you need to be present at the ZBA hearing to have standing. And either way, it's interesting to sit in, and more than likely this will be on Zoom. I think Rachel, they're still doing it by Zoom, aren't they, at this point?
Yeah, it's every Tuesday and Wednesday by Zoom. It's the same link and meeting ID every single week. Just keep in mind that they don't publish like a list of where you are. So you may be hanging on there for like 20 minutes or 4 hours, depending. So just keep that in mind. I was on ZBA last week for 5 hours. I had a 9:30 case. It didn't get heard till probably around 2. So just so people know. And the other thing I would just mention while we're having the conversation is like, sometimes the benefit of dealing with variance cases, at least in my opinion, personally, this is not anybody else's opinion, is that it gives the community opportunity to actually shape the way some of it goes. If you just push everyone to just do by right stuff, you may not like some of those results, and you definitely won't be able to have as thoughtful and thorough of a conversation as we've been able to have with this matter. So, and they don't always go this well. I think that despite the concerns, I really do appreciate everyone's willingness to continue to talk about this in a really respectful and considerate manner. And that may sound silly, but there's many times I just get yelled at by people. So I wholeheartedly appreciate it. And I think it is a way for my clients as well to really hear the concerns and be able to respond to them. So either way, however you feel, I just appreciate that the forum that we've had and sort of the cooperation.
It's an interesting comment on the by right, because as people know, the end of Clinton Street is an entire block demolished from the parking garage, which will have, I think, 9 townhouses. And that project was done entirely without, and entirely legally. I don't want to imply anything was wrong, but without any of this community input, because it was by right. So this is the only opportunity for people to have this type of input. If it wasn't a variance, we wouldn't be sitting here, because it wouldn't be to the civic, and so that is something to keep in mind. By right isn't always an advantage.
Well, I'll drop my email in the chat for anybody who didn't get it last time, and then I'm gonna jump off so you guys can continue the conversations. But hope everyone has a good rest of the night, and thanks so much for having us.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
Okay.
So, thank you, everybody. I'm going to stop the recording here.